I wanted to follow up on my last episode in which I talked about I'm hurt, but I have no hate, and how you can even get to that point of saying that. And that's because you've engaged in the grieving process to end a marriage in order to, in a very positive way, start a divorce. But something else that's equally important is this, and it came up yesterday as well, and that is the changing role of a wife and mother going from marriage to a divorce. It is the biggest change of all. And this message is really more for the men in their lives, for the husbands, because what happens when you have a long-term marriage, specifically husbands in a long-term marriage. So what is a long-term marriage? A long-term marriage is a marriage 10 years or longer. I think that's pretty much across the board, but it's definitely in California, 10 years or longer. And so quite often what happens in many marriages is wife won't be working most of the time. She will be raising the children. And that's fine because husband makes enough money and husband likes the fact that wife is at home. If that's the case, there's been a discussion at the beginning of having children that there is enough money to allow this to happen. That's one scenario. So, in that scenario where there's enough money, so mother manages the children, manages the household, which is a full-time job. When that divorce happens, it's not going to be overnight that wife gets a job. It's just not going to be. It can't be. But the more interesting part of this is as wife embarks on a new way of life, her whole identity is gone. Her identity has been wife and mother raising children. Once the children are graduated from high school, quite often people wait to get divorced until children are graduated from high school. So wife is no longer a mother and wife is no longer a wife. And quite often, husband just expects wife to jump up, get a job, and it's not going to happen like that. Wife has to wrap her head around a new identity. So not only is there grieving going on for both wife and husband, ending the marriage, moving forward in another incarnation of their life. Maybe you have another relationship waiting, maybe you don't. Typically, men have another relationship waiting. Typically men are the ones who get into relationships first, faster, and depending on the age of the woman, eventually she might too. But that thing about your whole identity is changing. That's a big deal. And I want men to understand that. It's a big deal. Not to force you to pay more in child and spousal support. That's never, ever my goal. It's just to let you understand what that means for your wife. Changing those roles is a huge, huge issue. Women have a lot invested in being a mom. So what does being a mom mean? Getting the kids up, feeding them, getting them to school, being at school if there's activities, picking them up after school, taking them to their after school activities, interfacing with other parents, being on a school board. I mean, there's so many different things a woman does if she is in charge of the family and the children. And then there's just, I'm his wife. There's just that. That will no longer be said. So I want you to be a little bit more understanding as you look at what may be an enormous financial burden. And I'm not discounting this. It might be an enormous financial burden. to be able to have to pay child support, spousal support, and then to provide for yourself. So I'm not um I'm not discounting that you have your challenges too. But I really just wanted to focus in on the identity of women and how that identity changes in a divorce, especially if there are minor children, or even if there are children who have just graduated from high school. You know, accepting being an empty nester is a big deal. And even if, let's just say there was no divorce, you're staying married, and the kids have now graduated from high school and have moved away, either to go to college or they're moving away somewhere. Adjusting to being an empty nester is a huge issue as well. So I want you to be a little bit more considerate of that while you explain your fear in the financial obligations that you have in this divorce. It's big. And then there's this other situation where, okay, so mom may be working a little bit. Mom may be working part-time, but making very little money because the part-time job mom has quite often is at the school. It's an easy enough. I've seen this so many times. It's easy. So your kids go to school, you get a part-time job doing something at school because you can be there with the kids. It's an advantage, but it doesn't pay much money. So, then why can't you just get another job that pays more money? There's more that goes into it than you think. And when people have to change their identity, evolve into a new identity, which they know they have to do, no argument there. It has to be done. And this is part of life. When our parents die, we feel like orphans. It's true. All of a sudden you're orphans. You have no parents. There's so many different times in life where we change our identity, we move into a new identity. But everybody has to understand that that's what's going on so that they can be sensitive and not press the wife into feeling less than, to feeling rushed, to feeling, even though she knows the divorce has to happen, and maybe she asked for the divorce, maybe she was the initial one that filed for the divorce. Still, in point of fact, she doesn't even know what's going to be happening. She doesn't even know what's in store for her emotionally. You find that out as you come to that point. I just want to put it out there that you have to be sensitive. And then here's where women have to be sensitive. If you have a husband that's not working, if you have a husband that's either suffering from depression or something, or the industry has changed and he has been looking for work, but it's not really working out, you have to be understanding too that he might not be that eager to move forward that quickly in a divorce. So I think there's some understanding going back and forth on how we have to look at each other as we're transitioning from the marriage to the divorce and all that that entails. There's fear, there's concern, there's confusion. Sometimes there's joy. I can't wait till this is over. I can't wait to begin my new life. Okay, well, that's good. But in so doing, if you have a spouse that needs a little more time, a little more understanding, a little bit more consideration, you got to give it. Not for the rest of your natural life, but you got to give it. And you have to talk about at least some boundaries, some time frames. And what I had mentioned earlier was sometimes it takes up to a year to go through the grieving process, but guaranteed it's no less than 6 months. I don't know why it takes up to a year, but that just seems to be enough time. We've gone through all the seasons, all the holidays, and now after a year, it just seems people can emotionally move on. Well, maybe you have to do it less than that. Maybe there's some challenging situations that are coming up. This is untenable. We can't stand it like this. We have to make some changes. Okay. All mediators will work with you on that. But it's a two-way street. Divorce is an issue of compromise. And in so doing, we have to be tolerant of each other. We have to be understanding of each other. We have to know what's going on with the other. And if you aren't told, you won't know. So I definitely have to tell a lot of my husbands, you can't sit on your wife. I mean, metaphorically speaking, you can't sit on your wife and tell her what she has to do to put her life together. Not your job. It wasn't really even your job as a married person. It's definitely not your job going into being unmarried. No, no, no. She knows she has to get her life together. She knows that. And once you involve industry professionals, they will talk like that. They will talk in terms of time frames and definition and what do we need to take care of in order to take the next step successfully. So I would say involve industry professionals as soon as the time is right, because then they will take over and have the conversations that you're not having very successfully. Yeah, it's not your job to tell your wife or your husband how they have to organize their lives. It's not your job. They know they have to organize their lives. They just may be going through some other emotional issues first that are important, that are necessary, that should be first. And then they can organize their lives. So, patience, tolerance, understanding, it goes far in making divorce decisions. But if you really have like a financial time frame, an emotional time frame in which, we have to separate, it's really destroying the kids, something like that, then it has to be an open discussion. And this is where a mediator comes in and can help to have a different type of discussion about the issues that need to be taken care of better than you can do yourselves, because your mediator has no immediate skin in the game, so to speak. They just want it to work out. There's no advantage to the mediator if you take 6 months, a year and a half, 2 years. So involve an industry professional. I think that'll be really good for all of you. All right, I think that's it. I just wanted to talk about the changing roles that we have in divorce. Certainly the changing role of mom and wife has to be dealt with, because just lastly, men will keep working. Men have been working, they will keep working if they've been the breadwinners. And so that role for them isn't going to change. Uh, but not being married, that role will change, not being a husband, unless there's another relationship. Okay. Just repeating myself. Thank you for the time that you've invested in listening to this, because I really think it's going to be quite helpful if you have that situation now going on. So anyway, write me, let me know if you like this video, ask me questions, suggest another topic. But as always, have an amicable day.